titles, which I'll mention a couple of them through the preceding slides and through the hour that we'll be together, just to sort of set the stage as to what we're going to be talking about in finding your dream colleges. Obviously, much of this conversation is going to be geared for those students that are moving on to college and university in the next year or years, and their parents, their full families, any counselors that might be joining us today. All of these things will be pertinent slides and then pertinent information that I think is actionable as we move forward. That said, we do have a full suite of graduate and professional school services at the Princeton Review. I will be able to certainly talk to you about those things and answer any questions that you may have. Certainly Aradhana and the full Manya team can do that continuously as well, but I will give a nod to certainly many of those things as we move forward. But the majority of these slides will be focused on moving on to college and university in the next year or years. Also, I've been doing so many of these lectures online over the last year of time. We've all become de facto Zoom experts, as we all know. But what I've found to make this conversation engaging is, although we'll have some question and answer designated time at the end of this hour, please don't hesitate to use the chat feature. My colleague Michael will be my eyes and ears directly onto the chat. I won't be able to see it because there are so many of folks with us today. But if you have a question when we're talking about test optional admission, do not hesitate and do not feel in any way that you're interrupting the flow of the conversation. If you have a question that is pertinent to those slides or pertinent to the conversation, directly move it into the chat, and Michael will be there and will volley that to me. Michael, why don't you say hello to our crowd this afternoon, pardon me, this evening, just so they can hear your voice.
Hi everyone, and I just dropped into the chat as well, where you can drop questions there.
Awesome. Okay, Michael, thank you so much, sir. All right, folks, so we'll jump right in. Those of you who might not know me well, I spend a lot of time doing lectures throughout the States. I do have a significant media presence here in the States as well as internationally. I'm editor-in-chief for the Princeton Review, which I'm responsible for content in several different channels, all of our books, much of the content that sits up on our website, our media presence at the Princeton Review, social included, and I work closely with, of course, with the Manya Group and our full product team in creating content in our SAT, ACT, full gamut of graduate school courses as well. So hopefully I'll be able to answer your question as we move forward. What you might not know about the Princeton Review is that we have such data collection power through our channels, and we collect information, and I'm going to move past this slide very quickly, but I just want you to know, students, parents of everybody that has joined us today, that we collect quantitative data directly from colleges, graduate schools, law school, business school, professional schools, and so on, directly from the colleges themselves. I will be noting that throughout our discussion today, but the second group, I call it qualitative data. But what I mean by qualitative data is that it is opinion-based data from three groups: students that are currently in high school moving on to college, their families, and then the third group, and it is the largest of the three, are directly from college and university students with whom we have direct interaction and can collect information from them. So you'll be hearing me talk about this idea of dream colleges, specifically through the lens of finding a school that's going to be the best fit for us, the best fit academically, the best fit financially, the best fit from a campus culture perspective, the best fit from a career services perspective, as Aradhana had said in her opening remarks, as one of the values of working with Manya, not only college, but then moving on to a career of substance. And those things I can't underscore enough as being the bedrock, the foundation of what we universally talk about at the Princeton Review and at Manya as being able to find a school that is the best fit: academic, campus culture, financial aid, and cost of university, and then of course the last part, which is career. Are you moving on to a career of substance or a graduate school of substance and then a career of substance? So those are the things that I'll be chatting about today. Again, you might not be as familiar with the Princeton Review's website. I put our links there as well. All of the information that we'll be talking about today, including all of our rankings and ratings mostly of national schools, but we do have certainly international partners as well. You can find there in full. Now, I promised to Radna, who's been my dear friend for a long time, that I would have some ice breakers that we call them ice crushers at the Princeton Review. And I was giving a lecture 2 days ago, and I promised that group of students and their parents that I would do the same exercise with them that I want to do with you today. So I set up the exercise in noting this, that it has never, ever been easier to get into college than it is today. And it has never, ever been harder to get into college and university as it is today. And when I laid that out there for the group that I was talking to today, and it was a large group like this evening's, they said, how could it both be incredibly easy and amazingly difficult to get into college? And I said, well, you know, there's a couple of things that we do at the Princeton Review. And again, thinking about data and thinking about how we collect information directly from schools. And I said, okay, well, we continuously talk and collect information from college-bound students, university-bound students, and their parents. But their biggest fear is the cost of college and university. Now, for international students that are coming to the States to study, financial aid is not often extended to international students. Some international students, there are some channels for that, but in large part, they are not. However, I wanted to make sure that we today knew what it actually cost to attend an American college or university. So I'm going to put this up there, and Michael is going to be, again, my eyes and ears on the chat. So we call this number the total cost of attendance, and we call this the Big Four at the Princeton Review, which is tuition, room and board, fees, and books. And the way we divide, I mean, you likely know this already, but the way we divide our universities here in the States to public colleges, those funded by states or specific cities, and those private colleges, many of the schools that you might be applying to, both public as well as on the private school side of the fence. So just thinking about this, I want you to use the chat. It could be students, extended family members, use the chat together, use the chat on your own. I want you to slug it. I want you to write in to the chat, and Michael, you'll be my eyes there, and you'll volley some of these answers my way. What does it actually cost on average to attend 1 year of public college or university here in the state? This is without financial aid, this is without scholarship, just the raw sticker cost of that public school. Slug it into the chat, and I will be listening for Michael. When you start to volley those answers his way, then he'll start reading them off to me. So public colleges, again, tuition, room and board, fees, and books. What does it actually cost to attend an American college or university that is public for 1 year? Michael, I'll look to you, my friend.
Got a couple answers: $20,000, $350.
All right. Anyone else? Michael, we'll start with that. One year of public college or universities in the States is right now $22,180. And this is on average for 4-year public college average across the states. Let's look to the other side of the fence. Let's look to private colleges, many of the schools that might be on your list or your family's list, private colleges. Let's look. Sometimes it is heart-stoppingly expensive. I will preface this by saying it is sometimes heart-stoppingly expensive, but what does it cost on average to attend 1 year of private college in the States? Again, tuition, room and board, fees, and books. Slug it into the chat. Michael, you'll be my eyes on it, my friend, and you give me the answers as they're coming in. What does it actually cost for 1 year of private college or university here in the States?
All right, getting some responses here: $100,000,
$100,000,
50 to 80,000.
Okay.
75,000, 40,000.
Oh, we have an NYU student there, I could tell. Yep.
60,000, 5 times the public costs.
5 times the public cost. Okay. Excellent. Okay, Michael, we could stop there. Folks, well done. The real number this year is $50,770, but it is not unreasonable that we should answer those higher, loftier numbers, because many of the schools that certainly that my students directly here, and I live in New York City, are applying to, are hitting those loftier sums. Some of the numbers that you guys were volleying out directly to Michael in the chat underscore that point as well. New York University, which is only a couple blocks from where I live, is this year going to be $79,000. University of Southern California, $79,000 as well. University of Chicago hit $80,000 a year just last year. So it's not unreasonable that we should volley over those loftier sums, but there is some solace to understanding that a public college costs about $22,000 and about $51,000 for a private school. Let's look at this. This is an average number of debt. I'm going to move past this one. I'm not going to force you to put this one in, but the biggest fear for students here in the States is assuming too much debt for college. But when I tell students that generally speaking, students in the States graduate with about $30,000 of debt, it is, again, some personal solace there as well. How about this one? The amount of US education debt that exists. Now, folks, you will hear this number if you're considering certainly coming to school here in the States. You will hear this number again and again and again. But before you answer this, and you could slug it into the chat as well, throw it into the chat, and Michael will read them to me. The amount of outstanding student debt that exists, it is a cartoonishly large number. I will preface it with that. Put it into the chat. How much student debt actually exists here in the United States? It is a cartoonishly large number. Again, I won't see the chat. Michael, you'll be my eyes on there.
Yeah, no response. No idea.
No idea. Okay.
Perhaps the strongest answer thus far.
No problem. No problem. It's this year. It is $1.5 trillion. So, folks, we have to understand, and it's actually between now 1.5 and $1.7 trillion. So, this is a lofty sum. When we think about how much debt there is, we have to understand that that also includes not only undergraduate schools, but law schools, business schools, medical schools, all grad arts and science schools. So as you're thinking, whether you're applying to graduate school, professional school, or applying to college, these numbers will be there, even for international students, and much of the literature that you'll read directly from schools themselves. Now, when I talked to student crowds, and again, I had referenced that crowd that I talked to the other night, I said, listen, it's never been easier and it has never been harder to get into college than it is today. And I asked them, I said, listen, we're going to try to prove out my completely unscientific theory, but we're going to do it together. And folks, we're going to do it again tonight. So here is the assignment for every student listening to my voice. I want you to write down or type in, actually, if you could type it into the chat, it would be great. Michael, please don't read this stuff to me because I don't want to hear the answers yet, but use the chat feature. Here's the assignment for every student listening to my voice. I want you to write down or type in the three colleges or universities here in the States that you would love to see yourself at as a college freshman, with these two caveats. It doesn't matter about academic admission, and it doesn't matter about certainly scholarship dollars that any international students might be receiving. So folks, what would be the three schools here in the United States that you as students would love to see yourself at as a college freshman? Parents, I want you to do the same thing. I want you to channel your son or daughter who is sitting next to you, and I want you to type in the names of three schools that you would love to see them at as a college freshman. Doesn't matter about academic admission, doesn't matter about financial aid. Folks, I'm only going to give you 27 seconds to write down these schools. Ready? Go. 27 seconds. Michael, well, I'll name off these minutes. Folks, any school is fair game, public or private, large or small, urban, suburban, or rural. It does not matter. Any school in the United States is fair game. We're running out of time here, folks. We have 13 seconds left, 12 seconds, 11 seconds. These schools could be military academies. They could be religious schools. They could be secular schools. They could be many of the schools that you know about. They could be, anyway, you're getting my point. Okay, folks, we have 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Okay, I want you to keep your fingers on your keyboard, or if you wrote it down, your pens in your hands. And I want you to cross off the following schools from the list that you just volleyed to us. Okay, ready? I want you to cross off, first of all, every Ivy League school here in the States. You know what they are: Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Dartmouth, 10. You know the schools. Cross them off your list if you have had any Ivy League school in your list. We're going to cross off here in my home city. We're going to cross off NYU, that's New York University. We're going to hit a couple of schools in the New England states. We're going to hit MIT. We're going to hit Northeastern in Boston. We're going to hit Boston College and Boston University. So every school that I'm naming off, I want you to cross off your virtual list or your hard list that you're keeping on the side. I want you to cross off the following schools in Washington, D.C. I want you to cross off Georgetown, George Washington University, and American University. I want you to cross off 2 schools in the South, in the southeastern part of the United States, Duke University and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I want you to cross off the following schools in the Midwest. I want you to cross off Northwestern and University of Chicago. 1 school in Texas, University of Texas at Austin, and then 3 schools in California. I want you to cross off the most popular school in the land here in the United States, which is the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, 119,000 applications last year. Cross it off your list if it's on your list. I want you to cross off University of California at Berkeley, that's UC Berkeley, and of course, University of Southern California, USC. Michael, that's about 30 schools. Folks, I want you to take your hands off your keyboards. I want you to take your pen, put your pens down, and I want you to answer the following question. I need you to slug this into the chat. Please raise your hand or say yes into the chat if you still have 3 US schools on your list. 3 US schools on your list after we named off those 25 or 30. Michael, you're going to be my eyes on that chat, my friend.
Yes, there are a few people with yeses.
Okay, we have a couple people yeses. We have 100 or so participants plus their parents, so we're going to double that. So we have a couple yeses. How about 2 schools left on your list? 2 schools left on your list. Slug it into the chat if you only have 2 schools left on your list.
Yeah, a few people.
A couple of people. How about
4 or
1
5.
school? 4 or 5. Okay, how about 1 school left on your list? 1 school left on your list, folks.
Yes, getting a couple further responses in. 3, 4, 5.
Okay. So we have 100 or so responses. We have a handful of people that still have some schools on their list. But folks, we have a problem here. Let's remember that, as we said before, it has never been easier to get into college and university here in the States, and it has never been harder to get into college or university here in the States. And it has never been easier because, as Aradhana and I know so well, there are now nearly 3,000 four-year colleges and universities here in the United States. But it has never been harder to get into any college than it is today, because so many of our students are applying to the same 20, 25 to 30 colleges. And when I do this exercise with students and parents, although each of those schools that I had to force you to name off of your list, cross off your list, are exceptional schools, they are certainly not going to be the best fit school, as we talked about, for every student. Our challenge, our opportunity today and moving forward working with Manya is to fine tune that list of best colleges, those best fit colleges for us. Now, I should tell you also that I do this exercise through an online survey at the Princeton Review, which you'll hear me mention over the next 45 minutes or so that we're together. And it's called our College Hopes and Worries Survey. So we had a little over 14,000 college-bound students and their parents answer this same question that I put out to you. What would be your dream college if money and academic admission were not factors in the process? And this data just came out this week on Tuesday, so it is the most fresh data of those 14,000 college-bound students and their parents. Let's look at what students said first. So students said, if college acceptance were not an issue and costs were not an issue, I would prefer to go to Harvard, I'd go to Stanford University in California, or I'd go to NYU right here in New York City. And their parents said Stanford, Harvard, and Princeton. Folks, we need to understand that although these are superlative universities, colleges and universities here in the States, the Stanford, let's use them as an example, the 47,000 students who applied to Stanford this past academic year, the 4.3% of whom were actually admitted to Stanford are superlative students indeed. But as we just talked about in our first couple of slides, we understand that there are many, many, many other colleges and universities that could be a better fit or just as fine a fit as so many of these schools. So the opportunity that we have starting today, and starting with certainly the many folks that we have in the western part of India, as Aradhana was saying, we have so many folks with us today. Let us make sure that we commit to one another to go into this college process with a very broad scope, a very broad lens, so that we can understand if these schools are the greatest schools for us. Now, the truth is that so many of these students, you can come back to us a couple of months from now or a year from now and say, Rob, I understand that Harvard and Stanford are still my #1 schools, but I can tell you exactly why, right? It is not just the brand and perception of going to an Ivy League school or a near Ivy League school, but it is the idea that this is the best school for me academically and otherwise. So we'll move on from this lecture, but I'm hoping that it was interesting for you. Now, I do have a comic relief slide here, and I want, this is an interesting one. I'm going to put up a date and a date line. So it'll be the city and then the month and a year. And I want somebody out there, and please do use the chat for this. So Michael, I'm going to be back looking at you, my friend. I want you to use the chat, and I want you to tell me why this date line, the date line, is so crucial for our understanding of modern college admission. Why is this date and date line so crucial for our understanding of this lecture of modern college admissions? Go ahead.
We see a blank red screen.
Oh yeah, it's all good. Here's the date and date line. You ready? Here we go. So here it is, a long trend line, Cambridge, Massachusetts, September 1636. Why is this date and that city so crucial to our understanding of modern college admission here in the States? Slug it into the chat. What happened that was so crucial in September 1636? Michael, you'll be my eyes on there. Folks, just volley your answer directly into the chat, and Michael, I'll look to you for those answers.
Harvard established.
Harvard is established. Anybody else?
Yeah, a few
Actually, Michael,
of the same.
We can stop there because that is the absolute truth. So Harvard welcomes in its first freshman class in September of 1636. Folks, let us look back 9 months before that to the fall of 1635. What was the admission team at Harvard College interested in? What were they looking for in that first freshman class that they were inviting onto campus in September of 1636? So what was Harvard seeking? They were seeking students with what for that first freshman class of September 1636? Slug it into the chat. Michael, you'll be my eyes on this, my friend.
Intellect.
What was that? Intellect. Well done. Yep. Anything else? There was no SAT or ACT, so you're right. Intellect is one good one. Anything else? No AP exams.
Extracurriculars.
Well done. Anything else?
Money.
Money. There you wait. You wait the extra beat, and all the good answers come out. Money. Okay. Anything else?
Quality education.
Quality education. Okay. Good stuff. Anything else? I think that's good.
Yeah,
we'll hold off
money.
there, Michael. So money, okay, yeah, background, excellent. So Harvard, these are the 4 things that Harvard College reports right now is that first freshman class had to have character, specifically strength of character, grit, perseverance. What obstacles did you have as a young person? And then, pardon me, how did you overcome those obstacles? And those are the things that they were looking for. Number 1. Number 2, background. Now, this is an unapologetically very large bucket. So likely money, religion, ethnicity, sex. I mean, all of the things, gender. I mean, all of those things are likely in that group of background, but Harvard only reports background. The next is going to be underscoring the intellect answers that we had there as well. Proficiency in Latin, proficiency in Greek. Love Harvard College admission. So folks, we have to understand that whether we were going to school or whether we are going to be applying to college and university in the next year or a few years, or we were applying to college 300 plus years ago, folks, we have to understand that the college process in and of itself can be a very scary, stress-ridden process, right? We understand. I could totally understand that my mother would easily pull me alongside and say, listen, Robert, you're never going to get into Harvard unless you do your Greek homework. But we have to understand that we have been collecting this data at the Princeton Review, sharing that data with Manya, in just the stress levels of students across not only the states, but also internationally in applying to schools. You can see from my quick graph here as well, it has been a high level of stress for many years. It continues to peak in 2021, given our pandemic, our COVID pandemic times. But folks, we also have to understand that although there is stress in the process, we can also find joy in this process. We should understand and remind ourselves that just because Harvard College 300 plus years ago reported that character and strength of character was their number one priority criteria for admission, we should also understand that that same human process exists in our modern context, specifically through our COVID lens, through the COVID experience that we are all having, specifically through our education experience. Folks, these things have not changed. They have not changed here in the States, and they certainly have not changed internationally for your own home countries as well. We have to understand that the metrics around admission have certainly shifted. We understand that so many students internationally, globally, had a significant shift back in March of 2020, moving classes directly from being in person for the majority of students to so quickly moving all those classes online. Many of the classes, and I suspect your schools as well, are the same as schools here in the States, that many students would have moved from a letter grade or a number generating class, having an actual GPA for a student's experience, to a pass-fail model, at least for the springtime of last year. Extracurricular activities, as some folks had volleyed through the chat, those extracurricular activities were all but either curtailed significantly or canceled outright. So we understand that some of those metrics have shifted, but the specifics around college admission continue to remain the same. Now, Aradhana and myself, and certainly the folks at Manya, feel so strongly about this point. The idea of schools being test optional. Now, these are colleges, universities here in the States that are using the SAT and the ACT previous to COVID, and now have suspended some of those activities and have embraced this idea of test optional. Now, I'm just going to spend two minutes just talking about this. The idea of test optional, let us today, this afternoon, define what this actually means. Test optional does not mean test prohibited. So a test optional schools, and as I was saying at the beginning of our lecture today, I collect information quantitatively from thousands of colleges across the United States and internationally. Many of those schools, even pre-COVID, a little over 1,000 of those colleges and universities here in the United States were already test optional. But what each of those schools have been reporting to me, even if they were test optional, are their SAT and ACT scores. So folks, let us understand that just because a school is test optional does not mean that you cannot submit your SAT and ACT scores. And I will argue that given our pandemic times, that the SAT, the ACT, certainly AP exams, an IB experience as well, each of those standardized testing experiences, but give us an opportunity as students to differentiate ourselves when so many things have been taken away from us through the COVID lens. Now, again, I'm going to mention that as we talk about the SAT and ACT, but I feel very strongly on this point in that the SAT and ACT is still a value, and it can be a differentiator through the modern context that we're living through for COVID. Folks, the idea of character does not stop with the Harvard College model 300 plus years ago. As Aradhana knows and the full team at Manya knows so well, that idea of students coming to the table and being evaluated for their contributions outside of academics are so important to that model of a school introducing and accepting students that are going to be a best fit for them as well. This idea of a holistic review, folks, and I'll just move past these things very quickly. Students students in India that are thinking about applying to schools in the States, through the COVID lens, have a stronger opportunity to build those relationships, interviews, making sure that they are staying connected and building relationships with universities as we move forward. Those things, again, thinking about through the international model, which has had its own challenges through COVID and our previous presidential administration, but we have to understand that these things are changing. They are changing rapidly, and you have an opportunity to continue to use our online platforms to build relationships at those schools. Michael, I'm going to move on to the next slide unless there's a question about that. I know we fired through a lot of information there.
Yes, had one here about can you tell us about how college acceptance rates might have changed compared to prior years?
Yes, and this is a good question, the idea of how college acceptance rates have changed. Now, if we have this conversation in another 60 to 90 days, I will have a better answer for you, because right now, colleges themselves, colleges, universities here in the States are still accepting students. Generally speaking, most students will be accepted by the end of March, the middle to the end of March of this month that we're in. So what we have anecdotally collected from many schools, certainly many of the most competitive schools in the United States, because of that test optional status that many of those schools have embraced this year due to COVID, that many schools, particularly the most competitive schools here in the United States, have had a significant increase in the amount of applications that they have received for this year. What we don't know yet, and what nobody knows yet, is how many of those schools are going to accept. How many of those students that have applied they will actually accept. We will find that out in the next 60 to 90 days. So I'll make sure that we continue the conversation through Aradhana and of course the Manya group to keep you abreast of those changing times here. Good question though, I appreciate it. Michael, I'm gonna move on, my friend. And folks, we can move past this slide quickly, but again, let us remind ourselves that the college process is a human process, but there are quantitative metrics, and I cannot underscore this enough. The primary driver in any student's application, and this is a student here nationally in the United States or an international student applying to schools here in the United States, your high school curriculum, your high school GPA are the primary driving factors that will be first considered by that admission person, counselor, or that admission committee evaluating your applications. And the specific question that counselor and that committee will ask is, have you challenged yourself throughout your high school curriculum? Have you challenged yourself with regular level courses, advanced level courses, AP level courses, IB level courses? What were the opportunities available to you as a student in high school? Did you take advantage of those opportunities? And then obviously, what is your GPA? What is the end result, the numerical result of that, of your experience? As we said before, testing is a very close second. SAT, ACT, AP exams. The SAT subject tests, as you know, have now just been announced at the latter part of January by the College Board that creates all SAT subject tests, that they will be offered no more. There'll be some international tests still given through the early part of the summer, but then they will be disbanded altogether. So we have to understand that the quantitative metrics are primary drivers in the process, but that they're the other parts, the human side of college admission, which are the things, the qualitative metrics, again, the personal, the human side, that allow us to drive those things to, I think, a successful end. So let us not forget that these are the primary drivers in the college process, and I'll move on. Michael, if there's a question on this is pretty straightforward, so I suspect that there probably isn't, but I'll look to you, my friend.
Yeah, a couple of questions about expected number of students to be enrolled in U.S. colleges in 2022. I suppose if applications might change, enrollments might change.
Yes, and this is a good question. So when we're talking about the idea of freshman admission for fall of 2021, there are extreme numbers of students applying to some schools and less students applying to other schools. So that calculus will work out over the next couple of months. But it's an important point to remember that for the freshman class that was admitted for fall of 2020, just this past year's freshman class, that's so unable to come to the States to study. And then so many students here in the States decided that they may not attend the college or university that they were admitted to. So some schools had significant declines in their freshman population for the fall of 2020. This is important because schools need students to be at their schools, not only academically, but they need their tuition dollars for that school to function financially. So as we move forward, we are going to see significant, likely, well, we're going to see increases, not only in the freshman class, but then also other classes throughout that undergraduate experience to fill in for some of the gap, some of the decline that so many schools experienced in fall of 2020. So my long-winded answer to your question, what is going to happen in fall 2022? We will likely see a leveling off of applications and a leveling off of the amount of students that can actually be admitted. But we should also understand that there's still going to be some increase, mild as it may be at some schools, continuously for the next full year, 4 years. That is to fill in the gap of students that they had for fall of 2020. So they have room on campus for so many students because of that decline at many schools. Michael, I'll look to you for another question, or I'll move on, sir.
There's a question about scholarships. On what basis do students get awarded scholarships?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time, the beginning part?
On what basis do students get awarded scholarships?
Yeah, this is a good question. There are two ways that students are awarded scholarships. Again, as we said, through the international lens, scholarships based on family need are generally speaking not extended to international students. That said, for academic prowess, for a student's ability to perform in high school and then on standardized tests, those are the two metrics. So it'll be high school GPA, the rigor of your curriculum, the rigor of your classes in high school, and then the SAT and the ACT are the major drivers for scholarship dollars based on your academic merit and your performance on the SAT or ACT. And I cannot stress that more critically in this process. Although some schools, through our test optional experience, cannot require that the SAT or ACT is there. So many of those test optional schools still require the SAT and ACT if they're applying for scholarship dollars at that school. And that's for a national student here in the States, certainly for international students as well. Good, that's a good question. I think, Michael, I'm going to move on just from here, sir. I want to make sure that I'm respectful of everybody's time. Okay, the SAT and the ACT, we will move past these things, but I think it is important for you to know just where the market sits right now for the SAT and the ACT. Now, as you know, students globally, the first time a student globally could have taken the SAT in 2020 was in August 29th of 2020 was the first SAT administration for last year. And you know that because so many of those SAT and ACT administrations were canceled due to COVID's impact. But here's the important thing to remember. From August until December, a student could take the SAT each of those months from August and December, once per month. 2.2 million students signed up for the SAT, but less than half of those students actually were able to take the SAT. Not for not wanting to take that, not their intention. Their intention was good, but they were unable to take the SAT due to social distancing requirements and overall capacity requirements to ensure social and safe testing. It's important to understand this because likely the ACT, the major competitor for the SAT, which is slightly less, there are slightly less test takers here in the United States for the ACT than the SAT, but the ACT has been very clear that they are likely going to make an announcement come this April that will say that they will be the first standardized test, other than the AP exams, but the first standardized tests to be given online and remotely. And if that happens, folks, then that means that the ACT will likely very quickly rise past the SAT in its amount of students taking those exams, and will be a significant shift into the structure, the process, and the delivery of the SAT or ACT to date. So it's an important thing because there's a tussle back and forth between the SAT and the ACT, a competition, a very stiff competition by the two, but likely students nationally and internationally will profit if one or both of those tests are now administered online due to COVID's impact. Similarly, for the AP exams, I have another slide on that, but AP exams will likely continue to increase in their popularity as we move forward. Just to give you the global numbers on AP exams, and this is from 2019, 2.7 million students globally took AP exams. But I suspect many of you are in this cohort. 2.7 million students took the AP exams, but there were 5.3 million administrations of those exams, so many students will take more than one AP exam. So again, AP exams will likely, because the SAT subject tests are going away, will continue to increase in popularity, and because of the lack of durability around the SAT and ACT to date, AP exams again are going to be at that heightened pitch of value. Michael, I'm going to move on because I know we're running out of time, but if there's a question on SAT or ACT, I'll take it.
Nope, we're good.
Okay, awesome. Folks, I think I'll move past this stuff just for the sake of time. As we know, so many schools have gone test optional due to COVID, but I'll put up here, again, Cornell, an Ivy League school. So many of these schools have embraced a test optional policy for 1 year. Cornell was one of those schools that embraced this idea for 1 year, but has now extended it due to COVID for 2 years. I just want to read you their statement. Here it is. We anticipate that many students who will have had reasonable and uninterrupted opportunities to take the ACT or SAT during the 2020 administrations will continue to submit results, and those results will continue to demonstrate preparation of college level work. I put this up here, folks, because I just want us to be wise to understand that some of the most competitive schools in the land, Cornell being one of them, says in this statement that if you have the ability to take the SAT or ACT, then we fully expect you to take that SAT or ACT, even though they are test optional. So again, my promise to Aradhana and to the full Manya group is to make sure that we have no blinders on in this process to the value of the SAT and the ACT through administration for so many students who are applying to college in the next year or years. But again, we'll talk about this as we move forward. AP exams, as I noted, likely will continue to be very attractive, not only to students, but likely to schools as well. This information just came out less than 4 weeks ago from the College Board, who creates all AP exams. There'll be 3 administrations for the AP tests. The Manya group knows this very well, starting in May and then ending in June. Now, there are going to be some at-home options for those AP exams, but they are not going to be given to all students. If for some reason your school, your high school continues to be 100% online, then that is one of those things that that the College Board will consider in allowing students to take an at-home online version of those tests. Of course, you can only take it on a computer. You can't take it on a phone. You can't take it on a tablet, and so on. But again, we'll report back. I'll make sure that we correspond directly with the Aradhana and the Manya group to make sure that you have the up-to-date information on AP exams. Michael, I will look to you, sir, if there's another question.
Various questions about GRE and GMAT and grad school questions that I also wanted to note that we'll be doing a future webinar segment talking about each of those tests as well as strategies for those tests. And yeah, Manya can give you the dates and Zoom information for joining those, which I would strongly encourage if you're interested in applying to grad schools here.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, and I will just make one notation on graduate school entrance exams, particularly GRE, GMAT, and LSAT have shifted due to COVID to completely online and remote experiences for those exams. So those exams are honestly much easier for students to take because they are completely remote and completely online. Now, there's some structure around those exams that a student has to comply with for it to be administered online, but students who are from high school moving on to college have not had that benefit of their tests, the SAT and ACT specifically, been able to take them as an at-home online exam. Different for APs last year, but again, students who are applying to graduate school certainly have more options to take their entry-level test and entry exam test as an at-home online experience. Folks, I'm going to move past this slide. I do write a book called The Best 386 Colleges. I'll make sure that we actually, Michael, maybe you could put a link to this directly into the chat to where they can find this information on princetonreview.com. I put this up here just to underscore our idea of finding a dream college, finding a best fit college. The way I advise all of my students here in the States, and we advise many students through the Princeton Review channel nationally here, a little over 1.4 million students annually. National students come through our queue. That's 1 out of every 2 students that applies to college. I talk about this book often, and I talk about the information, which it completely exists online as well, in that we go directly to whom we consider college experts of their own experience to find out about what a school is like, a best fit school will be like. So for this book, we surveyed a little over 139,000 current college students to collect information for this book. The new edition of this book will be out in August, and I'll remain in contact with of course, the full team at Manya to make sure that you get that information as we move forward. I talk about this as well, and again, I'm going to reference this College Hopes and Worries survey as I had in the opening part of our lecture, and it's the idea of surveying college-bound students and their parents. And this data just came out on Tuesday of this past week, saying what is the most likely deciding factor for students in thinking about how do they make that decision for college. And as you can see here, the 2 largest piece of this pie chart are finding a school that's the best fit and finding a school that is the best program leading into a career interest. And again, I'll underscore again what Aradhana was saying at the beginning of her opening remarks, saying that Manya is there not only for testing and getting into schools of value to that student, but also moving on from college to career, university to career. And that is what we are hearing from students nationally and certainly internationally. So I want you to know that if you're feeling this way, students or parents, that you are certainly not alone. And these things are just as important for students across the globe as they likely are to you as well. Students are still saying, yes, that college is worth it, but it is worth it for particular reasons. Again, going back to that idea of the best value for career services. So students moving on from college to a internship of substance, to a career and a job of substance, those things are there. So college is worth it for the investment that we would make nationally or international students coming to the States, but it is worth it because students are moving on to substantial careers of substance upon graduation. Again, I'll make one more note on this idea, and this is a fairly new thing that we've been collecting on our College Hopes and Worries survey. If you can find out about career service options at schools, so the career development facilities, the career development centers at specific colleges and universities, students and parents are answering near universally that they would not only value that, but they want to find out that information in making the decision to apply to a particular school. If this is you, and if you are feeling that way, please know it is not taboo to answer these questions, and that most colleges and universities, particularly here in the United States, are going to be ready to answer those questions and will likely volley that conversation proactively as well. I do a book, and Aradhana asked me to just make a note of this, Colleges That Create Futures. We did a small book, it's only 50 schools, but it's talking about those last 3 slides that I just talked about. That idea of career services, career development. What are students doing for the return on their investment and the return on their academic investment if they are students, and the return on the financial investment if they are students and parents. This book is also available online. You can pick it up in any bookstore online as well. But again, it underscores that these colleges themselves not only educate a student in full, but have a clear direction for that student moving on to internships, experiential learning opportunities while they're college and university students, and then moving directly on to careers of substance. So I can't underscore that one enough. I will end here, and then I'll move on to my contact information as well. We have a YouTube channel at the Princeton Review. I record at least 3 to 4 times a week talking about issues around COVID and college admission. We had a new book come out on that in that regard in October of this past year. Those of you who might not be following us on our YouTube channel, it is simply the Princeton Review's YouTube channel. I would be so grateful for you to stay in contact with me there, and some of these issues I will make sure that we talk about continuously as we move forward. We're doing a series right now on the AP exams, everything that students need to know for those May and June exams. It's a good one, and it's called Key Concepts for the AP. You can see there in the slide. And then my contact information. So folks, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, certainly through Aradhana and the full Manya team. And it has been such a pleasure. And I thank you, so grateful for the hour to spend with you. I'm happy to answer any questions, and then of course to continue answering questions as we move forward. But I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. Michael, I will answer any questions, but Aradhana, I will move the controls back to you too, my friend.
Yeah, Ronis, we have a few more questions here I could go
I'm
through,
happy to do it.
but your call, I didn't know if you, with the time.
Yeah, Aradhana, I want to be respectful of your
Aradhana, with time allotted,
family.
would you like to spend more time on questions? Or...
You know, Michael,
in the meantime, we could go ahead and
I'm listening, Michael. Go, please.
Okay, great. So yeah, scholarships based on SAT scores. To what extent can we get scholarship through SAT scores?
The answer is yes. And Michael, I'll look to you to put up that survey information in the chat, folks. It's a quick survey just to make sure that we're hitting our right points here. I'd be so grateful if you can put that, Michael, up into the chat while I answer these questions. The question of the SAT and of course ACT, are they tied to scholarships? The answer is yes, but they are not tied to scholarships singularly. So almost always, it will be a combination of your performance on the SAT and the ACT and your performance through your high school career, specifically as we had discussed, that idea of the curricula that you have challenged yourself with in high school, and then ultimately what your GPA, what your raw score is at the end. Combine that with your SAT and ACT scores, and that the crossing of the two is what will spur the majority of scholarships based on your academic merit, and then obviously your performance on the SAT and ACT.
Great. We have some questions about community colleges. If you could, describe or give some examples there.
Yeah, sure. The idea of a community college, and just make sure that our nomenclature is the same. So a two-year school, a community college here in the States, is an associate's degree granting school. So a four-year degree here in the States would be a bachelor's degree, as you know, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science. But an associate's degree is of value for several reasons. One, there's likely a better price point. It'll be less expensive to go to a two-year school than a four-year school. And generally speaking, many of the classes in those core curricula will stay the same in that two-year associate's degree granting school. And then most students will move on from that associate's degree to a four-year college to earn their bachelor's degree. Now, one thing to note is that sometimes there's some difficulty for students in transferring those courses from a two-year school to a four-year school. Generally speaking, that is relatively easy, but it's certainly good to keep in mind. And generally speaking, the scholarships that a student will receive will be less. And this is based on academic merit, not based on need, but on academic, will be less from when you actually matriculate into a four-year school, because you'd be there for only 2 years rather than 4 years. So likely the scholarship dollars that you'd receive would be far less than if you were going to that school for 4 years from the beginning.
Great. And do Harvard and Stanford accept AP tests?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yes. Without question, the answer is yes. And AP exams certainly at Harvard and Stanford, some of the most competitive schools in the country. Actually, Stanford is the most competitive school in the country, as we had discussed. 4.3% admission rate this past academic year. It has been eerily similar over the last year. But the answer is absolutely yes, except those AP exam scores. And many schools will expect that students, if they've had the opportunity to take the AP exams, will have done and followed that curricular route while they're in high school.
Great. Can you talk about the competitiveness of pre-med for international students?
Yeah, I mean, pre-med students in general are some of the most competitive students that will apply to college in the next year and years, and that has been consistent over time. Now, one thing to remember if you're following a pre-med track is that few colleges or universities will force a student to decide very early on in their experience, for example, when you're applying to college, that you're only going to be studying a pre-med route. Now, many students will say, I want to study pre-med, and that is where I want to, that is what I want to do. That is my ultimate goal. And many students will follow that through. So just two things to remember. One, if you're going to an articulated program, one program that is saving a student a year or more, then generally speaking, those are more competitive to get into. So it'll be a bachelor's degree school, moving on to a graduate professional medical school afterwards. So there might be some articulation between an undergraduate school and a medical school, a medical college after that. Generally speaking, students would need to decide from the beginning that they would be involved in that curricula, and then would focus on that moving forward. So that is one thing to keep in mind. But the majority of colleges and universities here in the States would be a traditional 4-year experience where you would decide your pre-med. You're still going to have to take all sorts of different classes in your liberal arts curriculum to make sure that that pre-med track is what you actually want to go for. So again, there is some adjustment, there's some margin for experimentation throughout your undergraduate experience, but many students may follow that pre-med track.
What if we can't take AP exams? Then will it degrade our application to colleges?
You can't be, this is a good question, you can't be penalized for not taking AP exams. But just to sharpen the question, if a student has been taking an AP curriculum, then I strongly encourage those students to sit for the AP exam. If a student has not taken an AP track, an AP curriculum, an AP course, then you can't be penalized for not taking that AP exam. But again, in thinking about what admission teams, admission counselors will be looking for, they will continuously be looking for students that have challenged themselves. The AP test is such a unique experience for students globally because it allows those students to be put on a standard plane, right? That is the value of standardized tests. The essay and the SAT and the ACT, Aradhana and her team will agree, are poor tests. They are coachable tests, hence the value of them, and they are incredibly valuable for academic admission and for scholarship dollars, as we've discussed many times here today. But the AP exams are much more fair standardized tests because they are testing you on your substance, the substance that you've learned, the academic substance that you've learned in class. And there is value to that. So I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity to do it, I would strongly encourage that you focus on it.
Does summer school program help? For example, if I create an organization for hosting a free summer program?
Yeah, summer programs in general, how you spend your time outside the classroom is absolutely valuable. And that can be creating a program, creating a, whatever that program might be, aid to others, altruistic, academic, it really doesn't matter. As long as it is something that is important to you, that you think is of value to the community or the folks that the group that you're focusing on, then it is of value. But I also want to note that if you've decided to take a job during the summertime or work during the academic year, also very valuable in that idea of underscoring your character, your grit, your perseverance, all the things that we had discussed at the beginning part of this lecture. Any way that you can underscore that is of great value. And yeah, I strongly encourage it because it will be considered certainly by schools across the country, across the globe, I should say. Michael, if there's one more question, I'll take it. If not, I want to make sure I'm respectful of folks' time. I'm 7 minutes over right now.
Yeah, and so we have some other, specific questions about specific programs here. But yeah, I think this would be a good time to wrap up. And I would recommend folks, if you didn't get your questions answered here, to follow up either with us on social media or with at monugroup.com.
Excellent, excellent. Michael, thank you so much. Aradhana, we'll turn the controls back over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll move back on. Okay. Folks, maybe Aradhana's not going to be able to join us. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, of course.
So thank you, and thank you everyone for joining in. It was a wonderful session.
Excellent. It was a pleasure, folks. Be well, and I'm looking forward to discussing again in the coming months.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for joining in. Audience, you can call us at the number mentioned in the chat or write to us at info@manyagroup.com for any queries. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.